The day began in chaos. A power outage had silenced our alarm clock, leaving both my wife and me scrambling to catch up with our morning routine. My stress was mild in comparison to hers. She had an earlier start, while my workday didn't begin until 9 a.m. My office was only a short 15-minute drive away. In her rush, my wife skipped her usual routine of checking emails and left her computer running. As I went to shut it down, a subject line from a few days earlier caught my attention, looking forward to a great time. Instinctively, I clicked it open. What I found inside hit me like a ton of bricks. It was an email detailing my wife's secret plan to escape to Hawaii with another man during my upcoming 2-week business trip. I felt a nauseating twist deep in my gut. Let me back up and give you the background. Chelsea and I met through mutual friends over a decade ago, 12 years, to be exact. They thought we'd be a good match, and as it turned out, they were right. We connected easily over our shared love for fitness and healthy living. Chelsea, a yoga instructor and personal trainer, was passionate about health. I, a marketing professional for a mid-size company, was more focused on growing my career. Whenever I had time, I loved diving into outdoor activities like hiking, mountain biking, and running. We complemented each other well. Chelsea, standing at 5 feet 6 inches with flowing brown hair and striking brown eyes, had a physique that turned heads. My 6 feet 3 inches frame with blonde hair and blue eyes made us the kind of couple people would describe as picture perfect. It wasn't love at first sight, but over time, our friendship blossomed into romance. After a few years, we tied the knot. For the past 8 years, I truly believed we were happy, at least, I was. But now, with this email in front of me, my entire perception of our marriage shattered. The reality I thought I knew began to crumble as I learned that Chelsea had been planning a romantic getaway with a man named Marcus. This affair had apparently been going on for months. She had everything plotted out, knowing full well that I'd be away on a crucial business trip, an opportunity that could lead to a promotion and a significant salary bump. But all of that faded into insignificance as I read those damning emails. Career success no longer mattered. What I needed now were answers. Who was this Marcus, and why had Chelsea done this to me? I began sifting through her inbox, looking for anything that might explain how long this affair had been going on or why she'd strayed. Luckily for me, she wasn't exactly tech-savvy, and I quickly found a folder labeled Trips, containing all her exchanges with Marcus. The more I uncovered, the more I realized this affair had been unfolding over the past 6 months. But why? Our life had always seemed so good, so full of laughter, shared interests, and contentment. What had driven her to betray me like this? I felt a storm of emotion swirling inside me, from shock to confusion to simmering anger. Before heading to work, I copied the emails onto a thumb drive. I needed time to process everything and figure out who Marcus was. What I really needed, though, was to understand why this had happened. As I shut down her computer and left for work, my mind raced with thoughts of Chelsea and this stranger, Marcus. The initial shock gave way to an overwhelming sense of rage, a burning desire for revenge. I'd never been the type to seek retribution or act out of anger, but this betrayal had ripped through me like nothing I'd ever experienced. Part of me was tempted to confront Chelsea immediately to demand answers, but I resisted. Instead, I set my sights on learning everything I could about Marcus. My anger began to morph into a calculated plan, one where I'd publicly expose their affair, making sure the fallout would be as humiliating as possible. I had 6 weeks before they would embark on their little romantic getaway, and I intended to make every one of those weeks count. When I arrived at work, I closed my office door and let my mind race. My goal wasn't just to find out more about Marcus, I needed every intricate detail of their planned trip. Slowly, a bold idea started to form, a plan to sabotage their getaway before it even started, revealing their affair in a way that would leave Chelsea unable to lie her way out of it. It was a risky strategy, but the thought of her facing the full weight of her betrayal pushed me forward. Throughout the day, I somehow managed to get some work done, though my mind was consumed by the unfolding plan. As the clock ticked closer to quitting time, I stayed behind, meticulously plotting the steps I needed to take and weighing the potential risks. If things went sideways or if my role in this got exposed, I knew jail time could be in my future. Still, I was ready to take that risk in the name of justice, to get more information about Marcus. I knew I needed access to Chelsea's email and computer. At first, I considered using software to crack her passwords, but I quickly realized the dangers of leaving any digital footprints behind if an investigation ever arose. I couldn't afford to have any traces leading back to me. So, I decided to gather the intel in a way that would be impossible to trace. Over the next few days, I began taking calculated precautions. I purchased several disposable cell phones, driving miles out of town and paying in cash to ensure anonymity. I also bought a small laptop which I planned to use in public spaces with free Wi-Fi, keeping my actions disconnected from home or work. In addition, I acquired wireless cameras and tiny bugs, which I planned to plant discreetly around the house to capture any incriminating conversations between Chelsea and Marcus. The mere thought of them together made me sick, but I knew this step was vital if I was to gather the evidence needed for my plan to work. As the days passed, I forced myself to act normal around Chelsea, hiding any signs that I was aware of her affair. It wasn't easy, but eventually, I found a rhythm. Smiling at her while she went about her day became almost routine, even as my mind seethed with resentment. Maybe I missed my true calling as an actor. During this time, I made sure every move I made was untraceable. Using one of the disposable phones, I reached out to an old friend. The first person I called was Will, an old college buddy I hadn't spoken to in over 14 years. "Will, it's Adrian. How have you been, man?" At first, he didn't seem to remember me, but after I jogged his memory with stories from our college days, he came around. "Adrian, man, those were some good times. What's going on with you?" After a brief catch-up, I cautiously introduced the real reason for my call. "Listen, I need your help with something, but it's not the kind of thing I want to discuss over the phone. Can we meet for lunch soon?" There was a pause before Will replied, "Yeah, sure, I can do that." We made plans to meet in a few days at a restaurant far from my office but close to his. I knew I was running out of time and options, and I hoped Will could help with what I had in mind. Meanwhile, I set up the cameras and bugs around our home, focusing on the bedroom and living room, where I guessed they'd be most likely to talk or worse. For the first week, I found nothing. Chelsea didn't bring Marcus to the house, and I began to wonder if they were meeting somewhere else. But during the second week, my suspicions were confirmed. I watched in horror as Chelsea and Marcus spent more than 2 hours together in our home. It was painful to see, but I forced myself to endure it, hoping they'd slip and reveal some useful information. Unfortunately, that first visit gave me little to work with. Then, the next week, they returned. This time, it wasn't just a romantic rendezvous, they were discussing their upcoming trip. Finally, I had what I needed, the flight number and departure time. As I listened to Chelsea's excited voice, my anger intensified. Every word she spoke, every laugh she shared with him, fueled a rage unlike anything I'd ever felt. For a brief moment, dark thoughts crossed my mind, thoughts of violence. But I quickly dismissed them. No, I didn't want fleeting revenge. I wanted something that would last, a punishment that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. In my mind, I began to craft a different kind of retribution. I envisioned a future where I'd confront Chelsea decades from now, on her deathbed. In my fantasy, I would tell her how I had destroyed her dream trip, revealing every detail with cold precision, watching the despair wash over her as she realized the full extent of my vengeance. Then I'd walk away, leaving her to live with the ruins of the life she had chosen. This revenge wouldn't be quick or violent, it would be slow, calculated, and, in the end, unforgettable. Fueled by a newfound sense of determination, I realized there was one final critical task left to complete, even though it carried significant risk. During my investigation, I had learned more about Marcus. He and my wife worked as personal trainers at the same health club, and Marcus had developed a notorious reputation for involving himself with married women. That pattern was about to meet an unpleasant end. Marcus lived nearby in a modest condo complex, just a short distance from the health club. I decided to take a calculated risk and observe his routine. I took a day off from work under the pretense of handling personal matters before an upcoming business trip. Armed with a digital camera featuring a powerful zoom lens, I staked out his residence for several hours. The condo complex was fairly unremarkable, consisting of simple two-bedroom units. Thankfully, there were no security cameras in the area, and it seemed his neighbors were gone during the day, fortunate for what I was planning. Anxiety gnawed at me as I prepared to meet Will. I knew that what I was about to ask of him was the most dangerous part of my entire plan, but if it worked, it would be worth every risk. I spotted Will entering the restaurant and waved him over. I had chosen a secluded table near the back, away from the few other patrons enjoying their late lunch. "Long time no see, man," Will greeted me as he approached. His appearance was haggard, he looked like a survivor from The Walking Dead. "What's the occasion?" We exchanged small talk, reminiscing about our wild college days, but I knew time was of the essence. Will, once the life of every party, now looked weathered beyond his years, likely the result of those same parties. After a few minutes of banter, I cut to the chase. "Will, I need your help," I said, sliding him a list of items. "I'm hosting a private event, and I was hoping you or someone you know could help me get these party favors. I'll make sure you're compensated." He looked at the list, initially surprised, but then a grin spread across his face. "Sure thing, man. Sounds like quite a party. Think I could get an invite?" Relieved, I nodded. "Absolutely, just get me what's on the list, and you'll have all the details." "Cool, but I'll need some upfront cash," Will replied, glancing at the envelope I'd brought. I handed it to him. "A few thousand. Will this cover it?" "More than enough," he said, pocketing the money. "When do you need it by?" I gave him a deadline and stressed the importance of timing. After exchanging contact details, we parted ways. My plan was underway. With only 2 weeks left before my business trip, time was critical. My wife and her lover were planning to leave the day after I departed, giving me just enough time to execute my plan. I met Will again, and he provided exactly what I had requested. Now, all that remained was to strategically place these items where they would be found but not too soon. 3 days before I was set to leave, I came home early to find my wife's suitcase already packed for her secret getaway. Carefully, I slipped a few surprises into her luggage, hidden so well that even unpacking and repacking wouldn't reveal them. But she wasn't the one I was targeting, those surprises were meant for someone else. Next came the most dangerous part, breaking into Marcus's condo. While I knew his work schedule, my lack of experience in this area made me nervous. Armed with a lockpick set and a guide I found online, I had practiced on different locks around my house and at work, gaining enough skill to feel confident. Early one afternoon, I told my boss I needed an extended lunch break and made my way to Marcus's place. Standing outside his condo, I took a deep breath and got to work on the lock. To my surprise, I managed to open the door in just over a minute. Time was of the essence. Wearing latex gloves, I moved swiftly through his condo, heading straight for the bedroom. I found his packed suitcase, ready for the trip, and just like I did with my wife's, I added a few gifts that would certainly make their vacation unforgettable. From there, I went to the kitchen, where I located a can of coffee. Smiling to myself, I emptied it into a bowl and slipped a few packets of my own into the mixture before returning it to its original spot. Satisfied that everything was perfectly in place, I left his condo, confident that my final task had been successfully completed. Just a couple of days before my trip, I contacted Clark, a friend with connections at the airport, specifically with the TSA. Armed with the relevant details of my wife and Marcus's upcoming flight, I carefully passed the information to him but was cautious about keeping my identity hidden. "Clark, I need you to do me a favor, but it's critical that no one knows where this info is coming from," I said, providing the flight details and Marcus's name, leaving my wife's out of the conversation. Clark assured me he'd handle it discreetly, promising to pass the intel to his cousin who worked in the right circles, leaving the rest in their hands. Before I could finalize my preparations, I made sure to dispose of all surveillance equipment I'd used, erasing any trace of my covert actions. I also added a few extras to Chelsea's car, setting her up for a wave of complications down the road. The day before my departure, I couldn't resist playing a little psychological game with my wife. When I got home from work, I adopted a grim expression, sinking into a chair as if burdened with heavy news. "What's wrong? Did something happen at work?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Actually, yes," I replied, pretending to be upset. "The clients we were supposed to meet suddenly cancelled, so it looks like the trip's off, a major setback for the company." I watched as her face registered shock, followed by panic, an expression that confirmed everything I already knew. She was frantically figuring out how to keep me on that flight so her little rendezvous with Marcus could proceed as planned. "Can't the company still send you? I mean, after all the work you put into this project, it would be a shame for it to go to waste," she suggested. The word shame almost made me laugh at the irony. Suppressing a chuckle, I decided to end her torment. "Relax, honey. The trip's still on," I said with a grin. Relief flooded her face, and she let out a nervous laugh. "You really had me there for a second. So, are you packed?" "Almost. Just a couple of things to toss in my bag, and I'll be ready to go." I couldn't help but throw in one more dig. "Will you miss me while I'm gone? Any plans for a girls' night out?" "No, nothing planned," she replied with a smile, though I could hear the lie in her words. "Just me waiting for my loving husband to come home." The next day, she drove me to the airport. Before we parted, I pulled her close for a long, deliberate kiss, knowing in my heart that it was the last one we'd ever share. With that, I boarded the plane, joining my colleagues for the business trip, and settled in for an uneventful flight. Once we arrived and checked into the hotel, I made a call to the house using the hotel phone. When no one answered, I left a message laced with subtle manipulation. "Hey, I've done something stupid. I left my phone in the cab, so I won't be able to reach you for a bit. If you need me, leave a message at the hotel desk, and I'll get back to you later." Of course, I hadn't really lost my phone, it was just another layer of the game I was playing, a ploy to ensure she couldn't easily contact me. The following day, I kept my phone off during the client meetings to avoid any interruptions. When I returned to the hotel, I checked for messages, but there were none, likely thanks to the airport security intervention Clark had set in motion. The meetings went well, even exceeding our expectations, and we wrapped up early. Back at the hotel, I found a few messages on the room phone, one from my wife, one from her father, and a third, to my surprise, from a DEA agent. A grin tugged at the corners of my mouth. Things were falling into place. Switching my phone back on, I saw several missed calls and voicemail notifications. As I listened to them, I kept my face neutral, masking the satisfaction bubbling inside me. My wife's message was the first, her voice trembling, she tearfully begged for help. The desperation in her tone was unmistakable. Next came her father, pleading for me to come back. His message was filled with urgency as he explained my wife had been arrested. Then the final voicemail came from the DEA agent, coldly outlining the situation, drug charges against my wife, a serious case. It was all coming together exactly as planned, but I needed to ensure that no one suspected my involvement. The next morning, I informed my boss about an urgent family matter, offering vague details while keeping the situation under wraps. He kindly granted me leave, though he stressed the importance of returning promptly to finalize our business deals. Wasting no time, I caught the earliest flight back home, ready to execute the next step. As soon as I landed, I found my lost cell phone and called my father-in-law, prepared to fully immerse myself in the unfolding drama. "What's going on? I got your message, but this doesn't make any sense. Chelsea arrested for drugs? She's never touched anything like that. Where did this happen?" I asked, playing up my confusion, even though I already knew the details. His voice came through heavy with embarrassment. "She was on her way to Hawaii with a friend. They were stopped at airport security, and they found drugs on both of them." "Wait, hold on a second," I interrupted, letting frustration seep into my voice. "She told me she had no plans, that she'd be home while I was away. Who is this friend? It sounds like one of her girlfriends dragged her into something stupid." There was a long pause before he hesitantly corrected me. "It wasn't one of her girlfriends. Adrian, the important thing is that she's in trouble and needs help. She loves you, and I know you love her, so I couldn't hold back any longer," cutting him off mid-sentence. My voice was tight with barely suppressed amusement. "Who was she with, Dad? Tell me." After another uncomfortable pause, he cleared his throat. "She was with a man. His name is Marcus something. He's been arrested too." I couldn't help but twist the knife a little deeper. "Let me get this straight. My wife, your daughter, was heading off to Hawaii with another man, and both of them got caught with drugs. Meanwhile, I'm out here working to support her. Is that what you're telling me?" A reluctant sigh came from the other end. "Yes, that's the situation." Silence hung between us for a moment before I finally spoke, my voice cold and resolute. "I need to speak with her lawyer, then this DEA agent, and after that, I'll talk to her. But she better have one hell of an explanation for why she was flying to Hawaii with some guy and how drugs ended up in the mix." Without waiting for a response, I hung up, knowing that the next phase was in motion. When I got home, my voicemail inbox was full. I sifted through the messages one by one, noting the expected ones about my misplaced phone, followed by a slew from Chelsea desperately trying to reach me while I was away. Her father had left numerous messages too, as had her lawyer, all demanding my immediate attention. I quickly arranged a meeting with the lawyer for the next morning and then dialed DEA agent DeStefano. We scheduled a meeting later that afternoon at his downtown office. Everything was lining up perfectly. After a quick cleanup, I headed out, my thoughts racing with whether I'd covered my tracks well enough to avoid suspicion. Soon, I found myself seated in what felt like an interrogation room. Agent DeStefano walked in with a folder in hand. "Thanks for coming. I have some questions about your wife that I hope you can help with," he said, glancing through the folder. "I can tell you right now, my wife has never been involved with drugs," I replied, injecting some frustration into my voice. "She's a yoga instructor." "It doesn't make any sense." But DeStefano wasn't fazed. "People make bad decisions for all kinds of reasons," he said calmly, eyes still on the folder. "Were you aware of her plans to go to Hawaii with this guy Marcus? He's claiming they were headed on a romantic trip. Did you know about the affair or the drugs?" I took a breath, keeping my response measured. "I didn't know any of this until I spoke to her father today. It's hard to believe. Chelsea must have been manipulated. She's not that kind of person." I chose my words carefully, knowing he'd be looking for any sign of dishonesty. To DeStefano's side, his expression was serious. "Unfortunately, it looks like you didn't know your wife was having an affair with Marcus, a drug dealer. We've already searched his place and found more evidence. We'll be searching your house next. You can either allow it voluntarily or we'll get a warrant, though I was sure her lawyer wouldn't have recommended it." I agreed to the search. It seemed like the best move to show I wasn't hiding anything. Soon after, DEA and FBI agents were in my home, combing through every room. They seized a few items, including pill bottles from the bathroom, but nothing major. I felt a sense of relief as they left, having not found anything that could link back to me. The following day, I met with Chelsea's lawyer, explaining my meeting with DeStefano and the search. The lawyer was far from pleased. "You need to contact me first before speaking to law enforcement again. Do not answer any more questions without me present," he instructed firmly, and I agreed. But my patience was wearing thin. I need to know what's going on. My wife was about to board a plane to Hawaii with another man, and now she's in this mess. If you expect me to help, I need the full story. His reply was careful. "You know I can't discuss her case with you. Attorney-client privilege applies." I clenched my jaw, frustrated by his evasiveness. "I need answers," I said firmly, but he didn't offer more. I knew I'd hit a wall, but it was just another step in my carefully crafted plan. With a heavy sigh, I abruptly exited the lawyer's office. Later that day, I visited the jail where Chelsea was being held. The room was a crowded space with inmates scattered around metal tables bolted to the floor, meeting with family members or lawyers. When Chelsea entered, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, she looked nothing like the woman I once knew. Her face was bare, her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, and her eyes were red and swollen, as though she hadn't slept in days. As soon as she saw me, tears welled up again. "I'm so glad you're here, baby," she sobbed, reaching out as I approached. Before I could react, a guard stopped her, reminding us there was no physical contact allowed. Her tears intensified at the restriction. "It's fine," I said calmly. "We'll figure this out, but first, I need to know the truth. How did you end up nearly flying off to Hawaii with this guy?" My voice was steady, though inside, anger simmered. Chelsea couldn't hold back her sobs. "Adrian, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm so sorry." "So, it's true?" I asked, my tone flat. "You were having an affair with this Marcus guy, a drug dealer, no less, weren't you?" She had no response, just more tears. "Please," she choked out, her voice trembling with desperation. "Please believe me when I say I've always loved you." I looked at her, silent for a long moment, then I shook my head. "Maybe I could have considered forgiveness, but you broke my heart into pieces. There's no forgiveness left for you." My voice grew cold. "When I leave here, I'm calling a divorce lawyer. The locks on the house will be changed, and your things will be sent to your parents. You're no longer a part of my life, Chelsea, and don't expect me to help in court. I won't be a character witness in your favor." Despite her cries and pleas, I turned and walked away, leaving her behind. After leaving the jail, I wasted no time. I went straight home and began packing up Chelsea's things. By the next day, I had arranged for all the locks to be changed, making sure she wouldn't be able to return. I even set up a meeting with a security company to install a new top-tier system. Within a few days, her belongings were packed up and ready to be delivered to her parents' house. Despite her constant attempts to contact me, I ignored every call. As far as I was concerned, Chelsea was dead to me. Once my home life was secured, I returned to work, and to my satisfaction, we landed the major clients we had been working toward. Shortly after, I was promoted, along with a hefty pay raise. The divorce was surprisingly straightforward. We agreed on a 50-50 split of our assets with no alimony, and Chelsea was responsible for her legal fees tied to the drug charges. She kept trying to reach out, but I kept my distance, uninterested in hearing anything she had to say. In court, the evidence against Chelsea was overwhelming. Her lawyer advised her to take a plea deal for a reduced sentence, which she reluctantly accepted. Marcus fought hard to clear his name, but in the end, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Chelsea received 5 years, marking the final chapter of our broken relationship. On the day of her sentencing, Chelsea requested to see me one last time before heading to prison. Despite my better judgment, I agreed, meeting her at her lawyer's office just an hour before her court appearance. Her face was puffy from crying, and her voice trembled as she spoke. "Adrian," she began, barely holding herself together. "Marcus meant nothing to me. It was always you. I've always loved you. I'm so sorry for everything. Hurting you was never what I wanted. I hope one day you'll find it in your heart to forgive me." Her words, laced with emotion, hit me harder than I expected. "Chelsea, I need to understand something," I began, my voice heavy with disappointment. "Why was it boredom? Did I fail to satisfy you in bed, or was it the allure of doing something forbidden? What drove you to destroy our marriage like this?" She hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I honestly don't know," she finally admitted. "Maybe it was the thrill of doing something wrong, but I've always loved you." "Clearly, your love wasn't enough to stop you from betraying me," I said, the weight of disillusionment thick in my tone. "I hope this is the last time I have to confront you, and I never want to see or hear from you again. Use your time in prison to reflect on the consequences of seeking excitement at the cost of everything we had. I imagine you'll find plenty of excitement behind bars, especially once the other inmates get a good look at you." My words were bitter, and I could see the fear flicker in her tear-filled eyes. In the years that followed, my life took a much different path. The company grew rapidly, and I moved up the ranks, eventually landing a VP position. When the opportunity arose to lead the New York office, I jumped at the chance. It was the perfect way to close the chapter on my old life. I sold the house and moved to Manhattan, settling into a comfortable apartment. Though Chelsea occasionally tried to reach out, usually through letters, I always returned them unopened. I was done with that part of my life. 7 years passed, and life in New York was good. I stayed single, enjoying brief relationships without any desire to settle down. One day, while at my office, I received a call from the lobby. A woman named Chelsea was there, requesting to see me. "Send her up," I told my assistant Naomi, while discreetly arranging for security to stand by. I also handed Naomi a note, instructing her to call me shortly after Chelsea arrived. When Chelsea entered my office, I barely recognized her. The years had not been kind. Her face, once radiant, now bore lines of weariness, and her clothing, though still elegant, seemed out of place, like she was clinging to a past long gone. I regarded her coolly, without a trace of emotion. "What do you want, Chelsea?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. "Adrian, I need to explain," she began, her voice cracking. "I didn't know anything about the drugs. Marcus must have planted them without me knowing. You have to believe me. I'm not involved in drugs." I shook my head. "Chelsea, you destroyed our marriage for a cheap affair. You lied to me then, and now you want me to believe you're innocent. Why should I trust you?" "You don't understand," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I still love you. I want us to be together again." Before she could continue, the phone rang. I hit the speaker button. "Yes, Naomi. Brooke called to confirm that you should get 4 tickets for the opening event. Her parents are coming to town and would like to meet you," Naomi informed me. "Thank you, Naomi. Please order the tickets and send her mother a dozen roses as well." I turned back to Chelsea. "You were saying?" Chelsea's eyes brimmed with tears. "Who's Brooke?" "Someone I've been seeing," I replied dismissively. "But that's not why you're here, is it?" "I still love you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I appreciate the sentiment," I replied coldly. "But let me be clear, I don't have any feelings for you anymore. That ended the day I found out about your betrayal. Whatever love I had for you is gone." "Adrian, please," she begged. "I had nothing to do with the drugs. Marcus set me up. You have to believe me." I slammed my hand on the desk, cutting her off. "Chelsea, stop. You cheated on me, and you're still lying. I don't believe you. I don't want to hear another excuse. Now it's time for you to go." Security is waiting outside, and they'll make sure you don't come back. Do you understand? Tears streamed down her face as she nodded silently. I escorted her to the door, where the guards were waiting to lead her out. Once she was gone, Naomi entered the room. What was that all about? She asked. Just saying goodbye and wishing her a good time.